we hope that you will enjoy the material that we have today. At least we have collected all this with a lot of passion. And we are quite confident that it will be interesting for you because it's really fresh, the things that we are presenting today. So first thing, I'll tell you what OSM is in case that you just enter in the room without knowing what we are doing in OSM. Well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Francisco-Javier Ramon. I'm the head of the Network Virtualization Initiative at Telefonica, and I happen to be serving as a chairman of ETSI OSM. So why are we doing this? I mean, the things that management and orchestration are a key element in any NFV deployment that you want to do seriously. But the thing is that there are many interpretations of that. And there's room for interpretation, and that is not particularly good. Because essentially what it means for the industry is that if you are a BNF vendor, the first thing that comes to your mind is how, and you have a platform that is already given, is how would I onboard my BNF in my environment, in that environment of my customer environment. But furthermore, what you'll be wondering is, once that I have onboarded, how it will behave. Will it behave as expected or not? And that's pretty bad, in case that you want to meet some expectations. And from the perspective of the service providers, the situation is not very bright either, because you need to understand how to operate that network service in practice. Interconnect different BNFs coming from different vendors and try to make them work end-to-end. And when I have achieved it, hopefully I should be able to integrate it with existing systems. Not all of them, but some of them. I won't change my whole network infrastructure completely just because of this reason. This is the key point that we want to solve. And this fragmentation in the interpretations creates natural entry barriers that are not healthy. So that's why we need to accelerate that convergence, and we are doing our best to make it. So let's explain this in layman's word. Why we think that there's something else that needs to be done? Because essentially what the story behind BNFV is that we have some components that can be replaced and can be safely and automatically assembled. That is the premises. So you have some Lego pieces and you want to build a castle. So the Lego pieces are the BNF catalog, your BNF catalog, and the network service is the castle. The story says that when a new BNF comes to your environment, you just onboard it using a descriptor, and that's it. And you add it to your catalog. So with a appropriate description of the service, you can build the castle. That is how the theory goes. But if you go to a lab and try to make this a reality, you'll see that the reality does not look like this. The reality is pretty much this one, that you have an uneven BNF modeling, or insufficient for most of the practical cases. And then you need to work a lot to do an appropriate onboarding. So unsurprisingly, this is how my BNF catalog looks like in practice. Unless that I have something that is theoretical. Then, wait, but I still have the network service descriptor. So if I assemble the things properly, but oh wait, this is pretty much the network service descriptor that I have. So unsurprisingly, with a lot of effort, I get something like this. And whoever who has tried to play with the technology today will tell you a similar story. So it's not sufficient saying that we have network service descriptors, we have BNF descriptors. What we need are the BNF descriptor and network service descriptor that actually meet the requirements of the real world. Okay? So this is the end of the technical part of the presentation. Now let's talk about business. So what OSM wants to do is to be part of the solution. I would not say, I mean, so anyone who tells you this is the solution is simply overselling what they are doing. But we want to be part of the solution. We want to deliver a production quality MANO stack that removes those uncertainties and still addresses the complexities of the real environments. And that requires that you get in touch with the real environment all the time and learn from them, okay? And create that feedback loop. Of course, we are not reinventing the wheel. It would be a pretty bad idea claiming that everything else that exists is not good, because it's not the reality. And actually, we've been active part of the creation of the existing standards. So we are not saying that what exists is not good, but what we can say is that as everything in technology has room for improvement, learning from the reality. So we take as a starting point the information models at ETSI NFV, and of course we want to contribute back on whichever findings that we have. Okay? And that will enable, hopefully, an ecosystem of IAM-compliant BNFs. So we have Lego pieces and we have the castle, right? The impact in terms of industry, it looks like this, is that from the development environment to the final customer environment, you'll have essentially the same descriptor and the same images across all the chain. And that's huge in terms of effort savings, because that effort is not creating value for anyone. Globally, it's destroying value for the whole industry. So the more that we can make this chain efficient, the more efficient that would be the market. And the more incentives the final customer will have to be brave creating new deployments, and the more opportunities will be for the guys on the left. And by the way, we are creating one agent in the middle. Okay? But since I represent also a service provider, I'll be a bit selfish here, and I'll tell you what are the benefits that we see. The benefits are the operational aspects. If we take them into account, and we want to take them into account from the very beginning at OSM, are properly considered in a realistic manner, it will make our life much easier, because we can concentrate on managing network services end-to-end instead of a collection of elements, and that we can interact with the whole end-to-end system with high-level primitives, which is what we want. Add a new subscriber, create a new VPN in a list of locations, etc., etc., etc. And at the same time, since we have parameterized the network service, we can replicate in several environments with minor changes without the need of recreating the network service from scratch. Okay? So that is a huge advantage, leveraging on the benefits of the virtualization. Okay? What is OSM scope? That is a new thing, because we are hearing a lot of questions about this. Perhaps it was unclear, so I'll refresh what we want. We want to create a production quality MANO stack. OSM scope covers all that is required to deliver that. And that means that we are creating, of course, elements for managing the resources, managing the BNFs, for managing the network service, end-to-end, and we even are creating some tools that allow us to do all the offline operations that are required to feed the system, okay? Which are the green part there. And as we are agnostic for the different types of infrastructure and SDNs, it's precisely why we have a connection, a plugin model, which is pretty powerful, and that's one of the reasons why we don't claim that we are tightly coupled with one of the options to those, because we are supporting several already. So, as you can see below, there are different types of infrastructure that are already supported in OSM, different type of SDN controllers, as you can see on the left, and that makes sense, because otherwise you are unable to bring NFV to real environments. Adrian Homan, who will give you an in-depth explanation on what are the details of all this architecture, so I won't invest much time here on the details, but I just wanted to tell you what is the scope of OSM and what we plan to do. The question is, okay, you're very ambitious on the objectives, but why do you think that you can be successful? So first thing is that we are almost 50 members already, which is huge. Members who have signed the member agreement, I mean, not companies who are following what OSM does, which of course there are many. Among them, you can see 7 global service providers and some leading players of the IT and cloud industry. Actually, I would say that all of them are there. That's a precondition, but it's not sufficient by itself. So we are still open to fellow travelers. It's very easy. I mean, the rules for engagement are pretty similar to the ones in ETSI NFV. Essentially, ETSI has recreated the same model for OSM. So it's free for ETSI members. It's almost free with some fees per meeting for non-ETSI members. And individual developers can participate, creating an individual developer account. So all those are the possibilities. What was in the previous picture are only the 2 first categories, obviously. Second thing is that we are embracing from the very beginning the actual difficulties that the real environment have. The EPA support, very important. I mean, what resources mean? Resources are not a continuum. Unfortunately, it's more complicated. You need to have some sense of structure. So we are taking that into account from the very beginning, because otherwise you are losing a lot of relevant aspects. And we are very proud that from the very beginning we are supporting that. We are supporting different types of beams and SDN controllers. We are supporting how to manage several sites. And actually, since it was by design, one of the new features that come with release 1, our last release, is precisely the support of multi-site. And the fourth premise that is common sense, but we wanted to enforce it, is that we are not pushing for greenfield deployments only. It's possible, according to the current model that we'll explain during this tutorial, to work in brownfield environments. Third point is that we are not starting in a speculative phase, because we started with some concrete things. We started with seed code, with 3 components that were a starting point, and were shown the starting points in some of the aspects that the OSM architecture wants to address. So we had OpenMANO as the seed for resource orchestration, we had Riftware for seed as service orchestration, and we had Juju as seed for the BNF management, which is essentially the configuration and management and abstraction of the BNFs. Okay, so that's helped us to start from something concrete but still sound. Okay, that doesn't mean that it has not evolved over the time, because from the seed code to the last release 1, there's been substantial changes in the whole thing. But it has helped us a lot to accelerate the convergence to something that is as powerful as you will see. Since the very beginning, that enables us to run complex use cases like this one, where we are building services layer on one over the other, combining all the features that I've mentioned before. And that was the starting point, but we have done a lot since then. First thing is that we launched our release in May. We had already a simplified onboarding process, a unique onboarding process, had human-readable descriptors, so we could follow. We already supported by them multiple beams, 2 by them, OpenStack and OpenBeam. Of course, we had full API support because we didn't remove it, essentially, because the seed code already allowed that. We supported underlay configuration via SDN, so we added by them. Of course, we had our web interface, well, the usual stuff, and we had launched by then a comprehensive set of documentation, how to use it, the rationale behind each of the design elements, etc., etc. But now we have launched a new release. Actually, we launched it last week. And we are really excited about that because it's a huge step forward. First is that we have extended the multi-beam support. Now we support VMware as well, with a connector that has been provided by VMware, who are active contributors to the project. We have polished our support of multiple SDN controllers, now ODL and Floodlight, and hopefully with the new plugin model for SDN, We'll see others very soon, because that's another thing that we have. Now we have polished the model of plugins, so it's very easy to adapt the environment to different types of infrastructure that are not in this listing. So we are thinking of public clouds and other type of deployments that perhaps are in your mind right now. It's pretty easy now that we have a plugin model to do so. We support the deployment in multiple sites and make that deployment coordinated. So essentially, we can do a deployment with taking into account geographical considerations. That we didn't think, given the complexity, we didn't think that we could make it for release 1, but we finally made it. We were able to test it. I'll tell you how now. And also very important, we wanted to make easy to test OSM for anyone who were not an insider. So we created a simplified installer. It's an all-in-one installer that, as complex as it sounds, because these are, as you can imagine, it's a huge amount of components, a huge amount of lines of software, still is very easy to install. And that's a one-click installer that does everything. Besides that, we added, as part of the governance at ETSI, we added OpenBIM as one of the reference BIM that could be used. So in case that you don't have an infrastructure on your own and you don't have an installation on your own, and you still want to try OSM, you don't have that prerequisite to have an existing OpenStack installation. You can start with an OpenBIM installation if you want, and we can provide it as well, along with the installer. So that's part of the governance of the project. It's something that is shipped there in case you want to use it, because for initial installation is much easier. I mean, as you know, OpenStack, setting up an OpenStack environment, depending on the case, might require some skills. And it's not the point for an initial test if you don't want to. So we are shipping as well OpenBIM in case you want to, you need it. And a large number of improvements in terms of usability and documentation. I mean, there's been a lot, and actually in the coming months we will be launching updates on these technical details, on the information models and on the like, and you'll see them in the web page. Okay. But essentially you will benefit from them just trying it. I mean. About the plugin model, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes here because it's a key principle in OSM. It's agnostic to the infrastructure. By agnostic doesn't mean that it can't leverage on the things that the infrastructure is capable of. What we say is that we need to make sure that we can treat with a decent level of abstraction different type of infrastructures. And that's precisely what the plugin models enables. And it enables it for cloud management systems, but also for SDN controllers. And that's good because it gives us a lot of freedom, enables different development cycles for the adapter for those elements without being completely coupled to the release cycles in OSM. So it gives a lot of possibilities even for testing environments, for public clouds, for many things that are to come, make them really straightforward to use them from OSM. We're really proud of this. About EPA, because I don't want to say that we just do EPA and that's it, because I've been attending this morning the network builders workshop. And it's not sufficient to claim that you are doing something. It's better to be detailed so others can create it, okay? So I'll tell you how we do EPA. EPA is about proper placement in the servers, but it's about proper interconnection of the elements. And if you are allowing the VMs to use interfaces in pass-through and SRIOB, it would be a really bad idea that later on you didn't have any automated mean to interconnect them. So that is precisely what OSM is providing already. So it's not only that we launch the things, the VMs, so that they can be placed in the servers as they should, but also we are providing means to interconnect them in an appropriate fashion, and that's the SDN controller part. So that is how we can stitch them, essentially. So we can do overlay, but we can also do underlay if we want. Again, it's a lot of freedom. And it makes sense because otherwise, if you run the test in a VNF in isolation, yields completely different results if you connect it. And that's not good. So we have taken that into account from the very beginning. And you might be wondering how we can guarantee that we are supporting different beams, as complex as it is. Simply integrating them in our CI/CD environment. And that's the reason why we've needed to do something about it. It's not just saying it. You need to provide a model that can grow with the different type of infrastructures that you want to support. And that's why we've created our network of remote labs. It's not that we have our CI/CD environment already hosted at ETSI premises, that we have it, of course, as any project. That's not a novelty. The new thing is that we have the possibility, and we have it already in place, a network of remote labs that are interconnected with different technologies. So that enables us to run a consistent testing and see that they interoperate successfully. And that's been, actually that's been very, has been essential to meet all the integration objectives for release 1. Because otherwise it would be a lot of duplicate work for everyone. But having this infrastructure has facilitated the things a lot. And we want to keep growing in this direction because it gives us a consistent approach to the interoperability. I'm pretty sure that we'll find new type of beams. We'll find different versioning that might not be backwards compatible, and we need to be ready for that. So that is the reason why we have put this in place, and this allows us to grow in different type of beams in a consistent manner. In fact, it's not surprising that we are participating in the plug test for the same reason, mainly because we are sharing the same type of infrastructure that ETSI provides. So for us, it's a small delta to participate. But second, because we are confident that trying against real things is when you learn what is missing. Because otherwise, just claiming that in all the combinations you can make it is simply unrealistic. So we want to be in touch with the reality continuously as much as we can. And that's one of the reasons why even in an early plug test, we feel brave enough to be participating. Because it's about learning and doing something about it. So we need to be in touch with the reality as much as we can. Okay. So besides participating, we are supporting open source projects. So that will mean facilities for many of the participants to understand how to onboard their BNFs or how to interact their infrastructure on OSM if they request it. So we will be quite open to facilitate that. Because we have committed to do so, so we will be there to help. But is that enough? It's not enough. We are really proud of the achievement so far. In only 6 months, we are really proud. But it's not sufficient. And we see that there are more challenges ahead that we'll embrace in the coming months. So first thing is that now that we have released 1, and we see that there's a lot of new capabilities, and actually it's very convenient to install and to set up in different environments, we think that this is the right time to build POCs based on OSM, new POCs. We didn't want to invest in too many POCs in parallel because we run the risk of losing the focus very early. But now that we have a consistent approach, is the right moment to see diversity of use cases running and take them into consideration. So that's one of the things that we want to do right now after launching release 1, because we have many on hold, actually. There are many VNF vendors who wanted to run use cases. We were saying, it's not the time, it's not the right time, now is the right time. And actually, we are that convinced that this is the right time, that some selected POC will be sponsored by the service providers in OSM as well. So, because now is the moment that we feel that they will not make us lose focus, will help us to progress. We'll add the necessary entropy that we need now. So we don't stay in the comfort zone forever. We are preparing feedback to ETSI NFV after release 1. That's important because it's one of our commitments. After each of the release, we'll be sharing our findings on taking into consideration the ETSI NFV models and see what were the ambiguities or the things that were not that clear, and where we needed to take some decisions so we could make it work. So it's good to report what were the decisions that we took in our interpretation of the standard, so it can be feedback, okay, based on the experience in reality. And it's not just enumerating what are the divergences, we'll be enumerating why, okay? But we need to prepare it. It's something that needs to be properly written and explained, so it's clear for everyone what are the rationale behind it. There are not many, but it's good to take note. Of course, we will begin our participation in the black test because it's about to start in the technical side, so we need to be ready and we'll need to commit some resources there. We need to commit to our designs for our next release, and that's something that you'll hear about in the next presentation from Adrian. What we have in our plans for the next release, because we have just launched one, but we want the next one. And we have the directions, we have the designs even, but we want to complete them and get implemented in one order. So that is what is missing in that picture. Is we have set the directions in last week's meeting. Now we want to get down to business to complete that and make it happen. And of course, keep explaining what we do, because there's a lot of things going on. The status of the project changes quite rapidly, as you are seeing. So we need to keep explaining what are the progress. Because if you just get this picture, in 6 months won't be real anymore. We'll have many other things, as Adrian will tell you. So we need to keep explaining and keeping up to date to the community on what is going on in OSM. The feedback plan to ETSI NFV is one of our foundational aspects, so we'll keep it as it's welcome and makes sense to NFV ASE as well. And we did that in the past. Some of the founding members of OSM, we did that in the past. It was quite successful because it was made in a manner that was not disruptive, just as a contribution at something that could be discussed. Okay, so we'll keep doing that in that friendly manner. Okay. About the last meeting, I think it's worth telling you that we had a meeting last week, and it went pretty well. It went pretty well in spite of what could be of challenging, because the same week that we were having a face-to-face, we were launching a release, which is a major event in whichever project of this nature. We were setting the directions, and we were starting a new release. All that in 1 week. So I must confess that before getting to that meeting, I was really scared. Seeing all those things going on and say, at least that we launched the release. If you have to choose one. But it happened that we launched the release, which was smoother than we expected. And we also were able to give demonstrations there. So members of OSM that were not actively participating in the development, more in the design, more from the BNF side, were able to learn how to use the new release. We managed to provide that because we could leverage again in that infrastructure that I told you. So we essentially reused the installations that we had. We started an in-depth review of the information model and the data model to take into account whichever that we had in mind for the new releases, what were the deltas, and we had very interesting discussions. And we prepared some feedback, some big lines of the feedback for the information models in the AG. We had very lively whiteboard discussions. That's something that only in these environments you can do, and I really missed in larger environments because it's not possible. But in smaller environments, it's still possible to have whiteboard discussions where everyone is engaged and stands up, and you can see the picture. And that helped us to set the directions for release 2 and beyond, which is great because we realized that there were, in all the things that we were brainstorming, or most of the things that we were brainstorming and agreed, there were not things that were unclear, that were in scope or were aligned. So clearly, that whiteboard discussions help to align everyone's minds in some objectives, and that's great because we won't argue anymore on directions. And now what we need to focus on which should come first, and that's precisely the next discussion that we need to make, and it will depend on bandwidth and resources, obviously, to see what goes in release 2, what goes in release 3, and so on. But that's great because we have a roadmap, and that's what we were looking for. and an excellent hosting by Dell, because with all these challenges at the same time, having continuous integration, having demos, having parallel rooms, having plenty of whiteboards everywhere. We had even a room which was a huge whiteboard. So all that was provided by the host, so it's worth mentioning that it was an excellent hosting. So we have, as I said, some directions for the future. The theme for the next release is deployment ready. And that is, we know that is a bold statement, knowing that in the leadership of the group, there are service providers, this is an even bolder statement, but it's precisely what we wanted to say. This is what we meant. So that means that for the release 2, we need to fulfill all those things that are in our mind required for that deployment ready of readiness of OSM. Some directions for release 2 and beyond. We will go to full dynamicity of the BNS and the network services, which requires a lot of things to be taken into account beyond the obvious ones, because it has impact on all the chain of provisioning and onboarding and the modeling, etc. So we are pretty aware of that, so we want to embrace that complexity. There's architectural support of the service assurance, so it's not an afterthought. We had some works already initiated in release 1, but we want to provide that piece inside OSM, so we have a consistent view of the service assurance thing. We want to have, from the perspective of security, many things, but one that I wanted to highlight is the role-based access control, which, I mean, is something that you give for granted, but we need to think of it in a manner that is intrinsically taken into account inside the model. Of course, we want to, now that we have the plugin model, we want to use it, so we want new type of beams and SDN controllers. Some of them, the list is not closed, obviously, but public clouds and ONOS as controller are obvious targets. And generalized approach to service chaining, so we can accommodate the different approaches in service chaining without compromising too much the architecture, so we can, even if they are somewhat divergent, we can do something that is common for all of them, and we think that we have a sound plan about it, and the support of nested network services, so we can build on top of existing network services, and we can reuse whichever template of network service already to create a bigger network service. That's something that we think that is achievable and definitely we want to do. And of course, continuous improvements of the whole thing, because we learn as we progress that there are things that might be missing, things that could be done better. In any engineering effort, you get that if it's a realistic and honest effort. So we foresee that they will need other things that are not in this list, but will inevitably happen. And that's, well, this is the new structure of OSM as project, because we renew it from each release to another, and we have now essentially it's continuity because we were doing well. There are some minor changes. The major thing is that we have now a dedicated task force for interoperability testing, which unsurprisingly will be focused on the plug test. So it's the major change to accommodate to the reality, as always. But besides that, there are no major changes in the structure of OSM in this new release. And if you want to learn more, there's a lot of material already there. First thing, if you want to try the all-in-one installer, is there in the website. There's a direct link in the portal, okay? So you don't need to learn by heart that long URL, but it will be in the slides anyway. There's a direct link in the main page. And all the documentation can be found in our wiki as well. So in case you want to learn more, and in case you want to learn in a friendlier manner, you have printed copies of the white paper around. I've seen a pile of them next to the door. You have some already. Okay, excellent. And in case that we run out of them, which is likely, you can still download the PDF. It's not that cool having a PDF than having a printed copy, but you can still read it. Okay. And that's it. Thank you very much.